8. Diet. Day 1. I have removed all the fattening food from the house. It was delicious. Meme. The whole incident was an innocent enough mistake. No, really. Last summer, it had been just another simple evening in Miracle Bay. That particular Saturday in June had been a rare day off for Dylan, and Charlie had met him at the home he'd renovated and decided to keep. She'd fed him filet mignon in a reduction sauce with grilled asparagus shoots on the side. And afterward, they'd watched the 50-something showing of Scarface. While Charlie watched the bloody end through her splayed fingers, she dared to peek at Dylan, sacked out on the floor in front of her, head on a sofa pillow. He'd fallen asleep, his breathing slow and measured. She didn't know how long she'd been enduring this torture needlessly, so she shut off the movie. Dylan didn't move a single muscle. He worked so hard, picking up extra work at the docks, occasionally doing odd handyman jobs at his mother's boarding house, and now renovating this Victorian to flip. No wonder he'd fallen asleep during his favorite movie. It was all too much. Taking a folded blanket from the sofa, Charlie draped it over his figure stretched out on the floor, one arm over his forehead, the other stretched out to the side. As long as she'd known Dylan, she couldn't say that she'd ever seen him sleep. This was actual proof he wasn't superhuman, and the knowledge settled into her, wrapping around her heart, warm and cozy. He wasn't perfect. Not entirely. He didn't move as she tucked the blanket around him, not even when she dared to rake a fingernail across his jawline, and the tough, dark bristle there. If he woke up, she'd claim he had something stuck to his jaw. As his best friend, it was her duty to remove it. Here were a few new things to know about Dylan. He was a heavy sleeper, if this was any indication. And there were many other things she didn't know about him, such as whether or not his full lips were soft. These were things she'd probably never know about him. She studied his handsome face, relaxed and oddly vulnerable now in rest. For years, she'd used any excuse she could to touch him, slapping his back if he ever coughed in front of her, removing a little something he had on his face. There never was anything. Fist bumps, but she'd had to imagine threading her fingers through his thick, dark hair. She did that now, surprised it was softer than it looked. Being this close to him, she felt an unexplainable heat and awareness of him. He'd always been attractive to her, but this moment felt different, special. The air between them was charged and thick, and she was tempted. A thought ran through her so wild and crazy that she pulled her hand back as if stung. Because she could kiss him now. It wasn't cheating. He wasn't dating anyone, and neither was she. Plus, he'd never know. It wouldn't change anything. She wouldn't have to worry that he'd break her heart, that she'd somehow break his. Just a kiss. It wasn't going to be a great kiss, seeing as he wouldn't be a participant. This kiss would be chaste, tender, and likely her only chance to kiss him. Ever. She bent lightly and carefully over him, so as not to make any sudden moves and wake him. Her lips brushed lightly over his full ones, pleasantly surprised at how soft they were. A tingle swept through her, and she'd swear the room shimmered in a soft, radiant glow. "I love you," she whispered, because it seemed that had always been true. She stayed longer than she'd planned, lips feathering against his so lightly it was almost as if it hadn't happened. But it had. She'd kissed her best friend without his permission, without his knowledge. Wrong. So wrong. She shot to her feet, terrified at what she'd done. They were friends, And that was all she needed. All he wanted. All she wanted. Most of the time. In those other moments, when he took her breath away just by giving her a lopsided smile, well, she'd get over that. Someday. Blinking away tears of shame, she carried the popcorn bowls to the kitchen. At least this small moment would always be hers. One private moment in time she could keep locked in her heart as she traveled the country dealing with impersonal co-workers who never seemed to give a whit about her. Dates that never went anywhere. Someday she'd laugh about this. Someday she'd tell her husband about this and he'd say, "Baby, I'm so glad he didn't wake up during that kiss because if he had, you and I might not be together." Someday she wouldn't feel this aching emptiness, the sinking sense that as much as she had in life, she had nothing if she didn't have him. There was something wrong with her. She was selfish. That was the problem. When she set the bowls on the counter of the kitchen, the sun was slipping down, a beautiful burst of orange, yellow, and red. It was like a gift, a reward and acknowledgement that this pain and longing would pass someday. She'd be able to move on. But like an unexpected slap or a sting, she hissed in a sharp breath at the realization that she'd accidentally kissed Dylan during the sunset. Fingers traced her mouth, remembering what she'd done, what she'd taken without permission. If one believed in the legend of the sunset kiss, and she did, it meant he could be the one. True love. If this was real, Dylan would feel it too when he woke up. He'd look at her differently. He'd sense the same electricity between them that she had. But 1 year later, not a thing between them was any different.